Team Church. I know you're thinking, man, Kenny looks good after New Year's. No, I'm Brad. I'm the student pastor. I am thrilled to be here on this lovely Sunday morning, and I hope what you hear this morning blesses you, that you get some encouragement. We love Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve is a big deal here at Team Church. We love it every single year. We love the week off afterwards, and we are so happy to be back. We are excited for a full year of ministry, of Sunday mornings, of Wednesday nights. But before we really get there, I just kind of want to pause, because so often we have Christmas Eve, and it's baby Jesus. It's 6 pounds, 8 ounce baby Jesus laying in a manger, and it's the candlelight, and it's the silent night, and it's awesome. And then we leave, and we have Christmas with our families. We have New Year's, and then we kind of take some time, and then we come back, and we just jump right into what's next, which is good, and it's appropriate, and it's fine. But I'm always fascinated, because I'm always the one up here the first Sunday of the year, and I always just think, well, yeah, we had Christmas Eve. We've got little baby Jesus, and we know that one day he dies on the cross. But he lived a life that was 33 years old. And we have about 3.5 years of his life recorded in the Gospels. We have the first maybe 2-ish years of his life recorded in the Gospels. But what about the 28 years in between? I'm 28 years old. So it's crazy for me to think that as long as I've been alive, there's a history of Jesus' life where we don't really see anything, where we don't really know anything. And there is one instance, and that's exactly what we're looking at today. But Jesus was a 2-year-old. He was a newborn baby. We love baby Jesus, Silent Night candles. We love that. But Jesus was a 2-year-old. I have a 2-year-old. He's the greatest thing ever. He runs like this. I have 4-year-olds, and they're really cute too, but they get a little attitude sometimes. Jesus was a 4-year-old. Jesus was a 13-year-old boy. He probably smelled bad. I'm around y'all's 13-year-old boys. And I know that Jesus was the sinless one, but I don't know if smelling bad is a sin. And if it is, you guys need to up your tithes. Some of these teenagers around here. Whew. But Jesus was also 20 and 25 and 28. And it's amazing to think about Jesus' life. How did he talk? What did he smell like? How did he interact with people as a 21-year-old man? What did he do? Well, we know that he was a carpenter. He built things. I don't know what necessarily he built. I like to think that Jesus built tables and chairs. He worked with wood. That much is clear. I don't know who built our dining room table, but the other day, Bree, my lovely wife, we're adopting. So we wanted to put the leaf in the table. Not like it's anytime soon, but our table could be bigger. We said our table should be bigger. Bree said, hey, babe, will you put the leaf, the section of the table that can go in the table? I said, of course, honey. So I get under the table. Well, there's latches, undo the latches. We get under there. I'm on one side, Bree's on the other. We're trying to yank this table apart, and it will not come apart for anything. So I get under the table, and I'm looking, and there's one side of the table I'll be the table. It's like this. There's the table, and then there's 2 little arms extending this way. And then this side of the table is the exact same thing. There's a flat part, and then there's 2 little arms under the table extending this way. So you've got arms over here and arms over here, and in the middle, there's one piece of wood that doesn't appear to be attached to anything. So I'm like, I bet if I can get that out, the thing will come apart. So I get under there with a hammer, and I'm just banging on the thing, because that's how I roll. I just bang on it until I fix it or I break it. Either way, I win. So I'm banging on the thing, and it's starting to make some leeway, and it's starting to free up and slide, and then I finally hit it, and the whole table just goes poof, and falls directly on me. And I'm like, hey, Bree, please get the table off me. It's really heavy. So she comes over, gets it off, and now the table is just held up on its side like this by those 2 little pieces of wood arms. And Bree and I are looking at one side of the table, trying to figure out how to put it back together, and the other half of the table's laying over here on these 2 small wooden arms. And Philip, one of our 4-year-olds, starts climbing on the table. And I'm like, hey, Philip, you weigh 40 pounds, get off. And he's climbing on the thing, and what do you think he does? He looks dead at me and says, why? And I say, get off the table, man. You're going to break our table. And then he does, and he comes over to me, and he looks at me like this, literally just like this. And I'm like, dude, I understand that you're angry, but you can't just climb on the table. It could break. Didn't you see that it? And he asked me why, because he genuinely did not understand why he was not allowed to climb on the fun slanted piece of wood. To him, that's field day. And I angrily told him to get off, and he asked why, because he did not understand. I'm the king of hobbies, and I've taken up golf recently. It's horrible. Please pray for me. But I'm really cheap too, so it does not work well. But there's a little par 3 course on the side of 74. It's like $10. So I took the boys one day, and all the holes there are very short, like 100 to 120 yards. And Frankie and Philip and Seth are behind me. I'm teeing up, bang, and I hit it, and it's like a 100-yard shot, and it goes about 30 yards left. It could be worse. But it goes over there, and Frankie says, "Why'd you hit it over there?" And I was like, because I'm not very good. I don't know. Like, I was trying to go there. Everybody knows. And he was like, "Why did you hit it over there?" And to him, I'm big, strong Superman dad. And he's genuinely asking, why would I hit the golf ball there if I was trying to go there? And he asked me why, because he did not understand. And I want you to think about this. If you have little kids or kids of any age in your house, you listen and watch how much they ask you why. I've started thinking about this, and it's probably 100,000 times a day, that's not an exaggeration, of how many times my 3, 4, and under children ask me why. Because they genuinely don't understand. And it can be frustrating and it can be annoying, but if you really zoom out and take a look at your own life, we oftentimes ask why for the same exact reasons. We're adults, we're young adults, we're married, we're older, we're younger, we've got a mortgage, wherever you are in life, you are also trying to answer the question of why just about with everything that you do. Because we don't always understand what's going on either. And let's be honest, why is a fine question to ask God. Talking to God, being in relationship with God, asking God questions is better than not doing that. So please be encouraged and know that you can ask God why all day long. God can handle you at your worst. God can handle your anger. God can handle your frustration. And why is a fine question to ask God. You might not get an answer. You might not understand the answer. It might be an answer that you do not like very much, but we are allowed to ask God why, which I think is beautiful. Because I am a cool dad, I think. I don't know everything. I don't have everything. I'm not perfect. I'm far from it. But every single day, literally about 100,000 times, my 3 kids look at me and ask why, because they don't understand. And we try and live our lives as in control as we can, as with all the answers as much as we can. But at the end of the day, we have the privilege and the opportunity to look at our Heavenly Father and ask the same questions in faith and genuineness as my 4-year-olds look at me and ask, why? Why can't I climb on the table? Why are you bad at golf? I don't know. But we have the privilege of asking. It's a natural question. And I don't know if you've ever considered this, but have you ever asked yourself, why do you do the things that you do? Why do you go? I don't want to give you an existential crisis first week of the new year, but why do you do the things that you do? Why do you go to work? Why do you come to church? Why do you say what you say? Why do you like the things that you like? There's a lot of whys to be had in life. And parents, I'm going to give you a little cheat code. If you've never considered this, it is tantamount to your life that you think about it right now. Your children, regardless of their age, are looking at you and asking why to everything. Why do my mom and dad yell? Why do my mom and dad make us eat dinner at the table? Why do my friends' parents allow them to have Snapchat at 10 years old? Why do we do this as a family? Why do you force us to not go to church every week? Why do I have to go to school? Why do I have to take a shower? It's a real one. But parents, if you've never thought about it, your kids are looking at you and you are giving them the answers to almost all of their whys in life. And if you've never considered that, I really want you to look at your own life and begin to formulate the answers to why do we do this as a family? Why do we go to church? Why do we allow our kids to do certain things? Why do we not allow our kids to do certain things? And believe me, you're a parent. You're not your kid's best friend all the time. And because I said so is a fine answer as well. But I need you to think about why you lead your family the way that you do. Because you are giving your children answers to questions they don't know how to ask yet. Jesus was a 12-year-old. Next time you're in a Bible trivia night, wherever you are, add this to your tool belt, because I didn't know this. The very first words of Jesus recorded in the Bible, anybody know what they are? I'll give you an answer. It's why. The very first words of Jesus ever recorded in Scripture are, why? Now again, Jesus was sinless, so it wasn't a sarcastic or a whiny little 4-year-old saying, why? But the first words of Jesus are, why? There's a really famous passage in Luke chapter 2, that's where we're going to be this morning, where Jesus is a 12-year-old. And again, Jesus was sinless, his parents were not. I've never lost my kid for 4 days. Joseph and Mary did. So good job if you've never done that either. But we're going to dive into that in just a second, because in student ministry, what do we need before we read any passage? Context and backstory, right? There's not much of it because Jesus is only 12 years old at this point. But Christmas Eve, Jesus is born. Mary gives birth. They're in a manger. Shepherds come and see them. Angels are there. Everybody is really happy-go-lucky. And then Joseph and Mary and baby Jesus leave, and they start traveling around. And then within the first 2 years of Jesus' life, then the wise men come and see him. The wise men do not go back and tell King Herod where Jesus is, so Herod gets really angry, and he decrees that all boys 2 and under should be killed. Why would it be 2 and younger? Because Jesus was 2 or younger at the time. So to avoid that, Joseph and Mary take Jesus all the way down to Egypt to flee from King Herod's horribleness. And then after that's all done and King Herod dies, Joseph and Mary and Jesus come back and they settle in Galilee. I skipped a part. Man, I'm so sorry. At 8 days old, they take Jesus to the temple. He's circumcised. They present Jesus to the Lord. And there are 2 people there named Simeon and Anna, and they've never seen Jesus, never laid eyes on Joseph and Mary, but they rejoice because this is the guy. They've been waiting on the Messiah, and there he is. So Joseph and Mary travel around. They flee Herod. They come back. They land in Galilee when Jesus is 2 to 3 years old, and that's where they have their life. That's where they love, serve, give, share. That's where they do life together. They have a house. They work. That's where they settle, in Galilee. So now, Jesus is 12 years old, and the story picks up in Luke chapter 2, verse 41. Now his parents, Jesus' parents, went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up according to custom. And when the feast was ended, as they were returning, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. His parents did not know it. But supposing him to be in the group, they went a full day's journey, and then they began to search for him among their relatives and acquaintances. And when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem searching for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. And when his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us so? Behold, your father and I have been searching for you in great distress." First words of Jesus ever recorded in the Bible, right here. And he said to them, "Why were you looking for me?" If you ever lost your kid for more than 30 minutes and then you said something to them and then they said, "Why were you looking for me?" Jesus, we lost you for 4 days, bro. And you say, "Why were you looking for me?" Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house? And they did not understand the saying that he spoke to them. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was submissive to them. And his mother treasured up all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. Pretty interesting passage. Lots of biblical interpretation, lots of biblical application starts with asking the right questions. So as we approach this seemingly inconspicuous, pretty straightforward passage, I want to look at the whys of what's going on before we look at anything else. The first one is, why were they there in the first place? Right? Look at verse 41. Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. His parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up, according to the custom, according to every single year of Jesus' life thus far, and every year following. Every single year, they went to Jerusalem, to the temple, to the feast of the Passover. That's really significant, and we're going to come back to it in just a second. Why did Joseph and Mary come back from Jerusalem? How could they forget their 12-year-old son, Jesus? Well, remember, Joseph and Mary did not know each other until Jesus was born. They were married. They had other kids. Families at this time were massive. People had a lot of kids. People had a lot of relatives. So Joseph and Mary and Jesus and all of Jesus' half-siblings, all of Jesus' aunts and uncles, they all went to Jerusalem together. And I don't know if you've ever been like at the park for a family reunion or something, but on Tuesday nights, we have a home team at my house, and there's 7, 8, 9, 10 kids there. 3 of those kids are mine. And we just hear them. I don't need to see them all the time. We know where they are. We know what they're doing. I could never tell you what one kid at any given moment is doing because I just hear all of them. And I'm like, those are the kids. That's fine. So in the very same way, this is not necessarily a Joseph and Mary problem, so they're not the worst parents ever, but there's a ton of family and a ton of friends traveling. And it takes them a day to notice, but a day later they say, hey, I see all the kids, but I don't see Jesus. Oh shoot, Jesus is not here. We need to go back to Jerusalem and look for him. So why did they go back to Jerusalem? Because Jesus was not there. Supposing him to be in the group, they went a day's journey, but they began to search for him among their relatives and acquaintances. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem searching for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. After 3 days, that's pretty significant. We'll come right back to that. 3, why did Jesus say that they should expect him to be there? If I ever lose my 12-year-old son for 4 days and he answers with, why were you looking for me? Didn't you know I'd be right here? Joseph and Mary weren't sinless. Jesus might have gotten spanked there. You ain't going to talk to me like that after I lost you for 4 days. I'm a little bit worried. I'm feeling lots of feelings, okay? But why did Jesus say that they should have expected him to be there? Because he's in his Father's house. So there's some whys of the passage, but there's a lot more going on beneath the surface. And if we can ask the proper questions of the text, I really believe that we can find proper answers that will influence our lives. So we've seen the why, but let's look at the what. Because why can always be more pointed, can always be more practical if you rephrase it and ask it as a what. So why do these things happen? Well, let's look at the what is going on in the passage. What were Jesus, Mary, and Joseph doing in Jerusalem? They were celebrating the feast of the Passover. I don't know if you've ever connected the two of these things, but we've done Egypt, the Exodus story, Israel in Egypt, like 3 times in the last calendar year, and it blows my mind every single time. The 10th plague that God threw at Egypt to finally let his people go was the angel of death coming and sweeping over the nation of Egypt. Do you know how do you know how God's people were saved in that moment? When they killed a sacrificial lamb and covered their house with the blood of the lamb. That's really cool, but do you know who's the ultimate Passover lamb? Jesus. And every single year the Passover happened, Jesus, who's the real Passover lamb, went to the temple in Jerusalem where God's presence was. It's really easy to just assume that their culture was like ours today, but this was pre-Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. God was not God's omnipresent, but God was not everywhere like how we think of him today. There was a temple with the presence of God and the Ark of the Covenant where God dwelled, and that was in the temple in Jerusalem. And they went to that temple every year at the feast of the Passover. Do you think that Jesus knew that the Passover was actually about him? Do you think that Jesus knew that he was the ultimate Passover lamb? Do you think that as all of God's people celebrated every single year, that God looked over their sins because the blood of the lamb? Do you think that Jesus knew that in just a few years that his blood would save the people? What is God doing in this passage? Joseph and Mary lose Jesus. They come back and they find him 3 days later sitting in the temple. The number 3 is pretty significant all throughout the Bible, but they lose Jesus. They don't know where he is. They don't know what he's doing. And then 3 days later, they find him where? In his Father's house. And his response is, where else would I be? And maybe what God is doing through this passage is proving to us what he is like and what he is doing. Oftentimes, we like to look for God in other places. It took Mary and Joseph 3 days to finally reckon maybe Jesus is exactly where we left him, and maybe he is dwelling in the temple. After 3 days, they found him dwelling in the temple. So Joseph and Mary know the whys of what they're doing. They know why they go to Jerusalem. They know why they look for Jesus. And they can also kind of see the whats. The what is God doing through all of these things. It's all speculation, but it's really fun to imagine, when do you think that Joseph and Mary realized this kid might actually be special? Yeah, sure, an angel came and talked to us both, and we know that he's the promised one of Israel. We know that he's the Messiah, but this kid, Jesus, he's clearly kind of advanced. He's pretty different. Jesus had little siblings. Who broke this lamp, Jude? It was Jesus. I don't think Jesus broke the lamp. He was clearly different. So I want to fast forward 20 years. 20 years from Jesus being a 12-year-old, which makes him a 32-year-old. The temple is so significant in the narrative of the Gospels and the narrative of Jesus' life. And Jesus' family life so largely revolves around the temple. And remember, the temple is often symbolic of God's presence. There was a Holy of Holies. Remember whenever the curtain got torn in two whenever Jesus died? Because the curtain of the Holy of Holies, that's where God lived. If you went behind that curtain, you were literally in the presence of God. And when Jesus died, that curtain got torn in two because now God's presence was for all people because of the Passover lamb. So the temple is so significant to the life of Jesus and the life of Jesus' family. He was there whenever he was 8 days old to be presented to the Lord and be circumcised. He was there every single year for the feast of the Passover. And he was there a lot throughout the course of the Gospels. In John chapter 9, we find ourselves a little bit later on in the ministry of Jesus. So he's probably 32, maybe 33 years old. And there's a fascinating story where there's a why that is asked, and Jesus answers with a what. Jesus is essentially chased out of the temple by the Pharisees because he's doing things that they don't really like, they don't really agree with. So Jesus and his disciples are kicked out of the temple, and they're just strolling on. As soon as they exit the temple doors, they see a guy who has a messed up hand. He has a withered hand from birth. His hand never developed. His hand never grew. He had a messed up hand. And his disciples say, hey, Jesus, who sinned, this guy or his parents? In that culture, if you had a physical disability, somebody believed because it was because of your sin, your family's sin, there was sin involved, and that's why you had a disability. They're asking Jesus, why is this guy this way? Jesus, why does this guy have a disability? And Jesus responds, and he doesn't answer their why, he gives them a what. He says, it's neither of those things, but this man is born this way so that the glory of God may be displayed. And I think that a lot of us can see some transformation in our lives if our whys become whats. What is a better question to ask God than why? Again, you might never know the why if you ask God. You might get an answer, you might not understand it, you might love it, you might hate it, I don't know. But you can always ask God why. Better to ask God questions than not ask God questions. But at the same time, if we, instead of looking for a why, look for a God, what are you doing? I guarantee you that you will start to see some spiritual growth in your own life. And it might be a little uncomfortable, it might be a little hard, and you might not love what God tells you. But why seeks answers that you might not ever get. Why is focused on our own confusion. Why starts from a place of not understanding. But God, what are you doing? Seeks purpose. It seeks involvement. So as we go into the new year, absolutely ask God what, but more than anything, ask God, what are you doing? It's not sinful to ask God questions. Jesus asked questions. If we seek why God, we may not understand, but if we seek God, what are you doing? We'll probably see God's will. It's 2025. New year, new me. New year, same God. New year, same church. New year, you fill in the blank. But if I were to honestly ask you to answer this question, why has God given you another year? What would you say? Seriously, take a minute. Look at the screen, close your eye, I don't care. Pray about it, whatever. Why has God given you another year? Again, this is a why, so we might not know the answer. We might not get an answer. We might not understand. But I'm willing to bet that most of us have some kind of inclination as to why God has us here. And maybe we don't. That's fine too. But a better question to this, hopefully your answer has something to do with God. Hopefully your answer has something to do with your family. Hopefully your answer has something to do with church involvement. But a better question is this: what are you going to do about it? Because we can have our whys all day long, but if we don't have a what, then there's nothing that causes us to act. Joseph and Mary had the whys of what they did as a family. Why do we go to the temple? Why are we here? Why are we raising the son, Jesus, the way that we are? Their whats are, well, because of that, we go to the temple. Because of that, we worship at home. Because of that, we raise our children in a household that fears God. And here's what's interesting, right? I really hope that we have honest, why did God give us another year? I hope that we have honest, what am I going to do about it? But if I posted some of my goals on my Instagram story, me and Bree's goals, right? And if you saw them, cool. If you didn't and you want to know them, I'll tell you. But if our whats don't line up with our whys, I really hope that you would call me on it and say, you're wrong. If I stood here and genuinely told all of you guys, my goal for 2025 is to be a professional bodybuilder. And about 6 months from now, I was looking a little thick, a little big-backed, as the kids say. And I started putting on so much weight, and I did not have a gym membership at all. And you saw me every single day eating McDonald's and Burger King. But I stood here and told you my goal is to be a professional bodybuilder. I would hope that some of you would come up to me and say, hey, Brad, you say that you want this, but this is what you're doing, and those two things don't line up. Very similarly, a lot of us might answer the question, why did God give me another year, and what am I going to do about it? Well, God gave me a year to lead my family spiritually. God gave me another year to draw close to Him and grow in my discipleship and grow in our church family. And what am I going to do about it? I'm going to join a home team, and I'm going to be at church, and I'm going to get my kids involved. These are great answers. But just like I'm telling you guys I want to be a bodybuilder, which is a joke, by the way. I'm too lazy. Which is a joke. But those are my answers, and here's what I'm going to do about it, and I never do those things. I'm either deceiving myself or I'm just flat out lying. And very similarly, we deceive ourselves and lie to God when we put other things before Him. It's great if we know the answers. It's great if we know what we're supposed to want and even how we're supposed to obtain those things. Spiritual growth, connection with people, vulnerability in small groups, all of these things which we know that we should want and we know how to get them. But here's a question for you. What dominates your Sundays and your Wednesday nights? Because that's probably where you're headed in 2025. And I'm not mad at you. I just want us to be realistic. We can say all day long that I want this for my family and I want this for my kids, but what you give your time to is what's getting your time. What you give your energy and your attention and your focus to is what's getting your energy and attention and focus. And remember, parents, your kids are looking at you asking why. So if you tell your kids, well, yeah, we love God, God comes first, but we do travel ball more than we do church, though. We do dinner with friends on Sunday and Wednesdays more. There are things in our calendar that dominate our time more than our church. So I see you saying this, but I don't see it in our lives. And then 80% of Bible-believing Christian seniors graduate high school, and a year later, 80% of those kids no longer claim to be Christians. That's a terrifying statistic. And I really believe largely that is because we, not you, we are constantly fighting to give God our number one spot. Similar to the first words of Jesus ever. Do you know the first law that God ever gives His people? God tells Adam and Eve not to eat the fruit. God tells Noah how to build the ark. But do you ever know the first time that God says, hey, write this down, this is serious? It's the first commandment. And the first commandment is, you shall have no other gods before me. And that took place about 5,000 years ago. So I think that we're not just trying to make God upset. I just think that we fall victim to the same mentality that the Israelites did. There are so many things vying for our attention and our affection and our time and our energy that if we blink, our calendars get too full and we kind of push God to the back burner. What dominates your Sundays? What dominates your life throughout the week that prevents you from getting into a home team? What prevents you from getting your kids here on a Wednesday? And please never hear me say that if you don't go to church, you're not a Christian. You don't have to go to church to be a Christian. And you also don't have to go home tonight or tomorrow night or the next night to be married. But stay away from your spouse long enough and let me ask you how your marriage goes. What's dominating your calendars? What's dominating your time? Because we deceive ourselves and lie to God when we put other things before Him. I genuinely have the greatest job in the entire world. I'm a product of student ministry. If I never got involved in the student ministry of this church, I have no idea where I would be in life. I'm not saying this church is the only student ministry that's legit in the world, but it's the only one that I've ever been a part of, and it absolutely saved my life. Jesus saved my life through this church. Started coming here as a junior in high school. My parents didn't go to church. They weren't bought in. They weren't involved. But I came here as a junior in high school, and I connected with the youth pastor, who's a guy not even close to as cool as I am. And I connected with my leaders, and I was poured into by my leaders. Rob Pryles, who's doing sound right now and has for the last 25 years, was my leader. And we have a relationship because of me coming here as a high schooler. I learned from trusted, wise adults who love your kids and want to disciple your kids. And I don't know where I would be without this student ministry. And I don't want you guys to watch your kids come to church once a month. Well, we were in church. You were in church, but there were also a lot of other things going on that you blinked and you actually weren't here that much, and your kids never really bought into Pursuit because they were only here once a month. In 2025, get involved. Get your kids involved. They don't like it. You're their parent. Get them involved. What you want for your kids, make it happen. If they have a problem with it, they can talk to me. We can talk to them. You're their parent. What do you want for your kids, and what are you going to do about it? But in 2025, why has God given you another year, and what are you going to do about it? I really hope if you have a kid of any age, we have amazing kids ministries, we have awesome young adults ministries, but especially if you have a middle or a high schooler, I am praying that our numbers just explode because you feel so compelled that you want your kids to grow and learn and gain friends and be poured into by trusted, amazing, and wise adult leaders. This is the most important thing that we could do for our families. Jesus and his family revolved around the temple. Why? Because they love God. And there are things in our lives fighting for our attention, affection, energy, and effort that will pull us away from our temple. And again, you don't have to go to church to be a Christian. And you also don't have to go home tonight to be married. Probably won't work out very well. But let me tell you about Pursuit, man. Pursuit exists to seek Jesus alongside students. There's never a us and them. Yeah, we're a little older, might be a little wiser. Sometimes I'm a little goofier. Sometimes I might smell worse. But Pursuit exists to seek Jesus alongside your students. Leaders are my friends. Leaders are my peers. Some leaders are older than me. Some leaders are younger than me. But I know them and I trust all of them. And you want your child to be discipled by them. Pursuit exists to seek Jesus alongside students, to encourage a deep and personal relationship with him. My favorite thing about our student ministry is anytime anything is brought up in any group, I trust leaders enough to say, well, have you talked to Jesus about this? What does the Bible say about this? Every single thing that we do and believe flows through a relationship with Jesus. And lastly, to show students how to live out their faith in the real world. It's really cool if we have the best youth group ever and we have the most intense small groups, but it would really be a huge failure on all ends if on Thursday mornings students go back to school and they forget everything they learned and they live just like their friends. Pursuit is a big deal. Team Kid is a big deal. Being here on Sunday mornings is a big deal. And I don't want you guys here just so our numbers are good. I don't care about that. I want you guys here so you and me can do life together, so we can buy in, so we can seek Jesus together, so we can encourage a deep and personal relationship with him, and so we can all live out our faith in the real world. Because that's what Jesus and his family did. They were in the temple. They were around the temple. They did temple together. going to have to start calling ourselves Team Temple. I don't know. We'll talk, Kenny. Let's pray. Jesus, we love you, God. We thank you for a new year. We thank you for this time together this morning. We thank you for just the example that Joseph and Mary set for their son Jesus, God, that they went to church as a family. They did things as a family to encourage relationship with you. Father, I pray that we would be challenged by them, that we would be encouraged by a fresh start of the new year. But God, more than anything, that we would crave a relationship with you and take the appropriate measures to dive into that. Jesus, we love you so much, and it's in your name that we pray. Amen.